In our early local groups, we became involved in organizing women, low-paid women workers who were in the night cleaning business, which led to the making of Bill Night Cleaners. But that kind of contact with the unions also led to thinking about organizing artists, which led to the Artists Union. And in the Artists Union, because I was elected the first chairperson by accident because there were two men and split the vote, and so it went to me. So then we made women's issues a priority, and we set up a women's workshop. And in the women's workshop was where I met Kay Hunt and Margaret Harrison, and where we decided to do the project on women in work. So it was already, we'd already done the work with trying to unionize the paid women workers, but here was going to be a case study of an industry, the metal box industry, and the way that they dealt with the implementation of equal pay while the bill was becoming an act, because legally it didn't have to be consummated, right, until '74, I think. And so that was how we, basically, my entry into the women's movement, and then unionization and to the Women in Work project. Well, that was selected by Kay Hunt, who had a family history. Her working class mother, maybe not specifically in that industry, but you know, in that area, and she wanted to work on that. A certain form of essentialism, like things are very simplified, they're very black and white, and this is how they were at the beginning in the 70s. And then the more complicated questions kind of emerged after people thought through the first round, and then got into the so-called anti-essentialist thing about, you know, biology is not, you know, destiny and all that. And then in terms of race with Stuart Hall, where it was the same thing that had happened in the women's movement, happened in, you know, Stuart's writing and things around that issue, where it was moved to the question of representation, like against positive images of women or against positive images of black, and thinking about the system of representation as ideological, but not a reflection of what's out there, but an actual process of changing. You know, you make meaning, so it matters. And there was still an optimism through the 80s that you could intervene in those representations, those systems, right? Which was one reason, you know, I didn't use the woman's image, which, you know, became very controversial. I mean, just around those questions became dominant in the more anti-essentialist moment of the movement. We didn't tell the lawyers that we were doing a kind of expose. So, you know, a lot of the documents we got were sort of on false pretenses things. And so we couldn't be, you know, too out with the women, because it was also, we don't want to get them in trouble. So it was much more, I would say, straightforward as a documentary procedure than Night Cleaners, because Night Cleaners was a total involvement, you know, on a personal level, and, you know, with the organizer of the Cleaners, May Hobbs, you know, actually supporting her financially, we all raised money. It was just, and we practically lived with people, you know. It was all day and night long, you know. It was, and some people became more central, like Jean Mormont and Mayhouse. But when we did the factory project, we weren't overtly trying to unionize them, like we were in the night cleaners. But then when we put all the research together, we invited them to the exhibition, and many of them came. And then, of course, the employers found out what it was and did threaten them. The best thing is that the trade union organizers, in this case, were able to use our material. So that had so it's slightly different the way that one worked. And in the strategy, aesthetic strategies for women in work, we didn't want to picture the women. So when you see their work, it's the hands, but actually, in itself, that's an interesting study, because most of the machines men work with that are documented on the films that I took, you need the whole body. You have to show the whole body. They use the whole body. But the things, the grades, like grade 2, which is where you could put women and then say their work was different, so it wasn't subject to equal pay. There was also an aesthetic decision of not photographing the women except as, people and personalities, which is why we gave them all a portrait, which is this separate work and is a kind of acknowledgement of them in a different way. And as a photographer, as you know, because you're artists, that's a very different kind of exchange between the artist and the subject. And of course, to use the face is to encourage identification. What I know is about the fact that the employers were very upset about it. But of course, how the trade union organizers that told us that they made use of it, that it was very helpful, what the outcome of their work was, I don't think that's been documented. I mean, it's like another work that would have followed. What we know is that the legislation went through, but I think the grades in some way remain. That's kind of a well-established trajectory in the history of avant-garde art and conceptualism. Of course, as an aesthetic, it was linked to the notion that it was the idea, not the object. What Richard Cork at the time called, social purpose was this sort of move by artists like Conrad Atkinson and others, and then including myself and the Women in Work project, is that you would change the focus in terms of content. So the aesthetic, Hans Hack is a well-known example of the kinds of materials he uses for that documentary expose, as it were. But he started out with just doing systems pieces, and so did I, and so did most artists with Ramon conceptualism. It didn't have a political content. It was more about the structure of ideas, or a kind of limited idea of documentation. So it was kind of an importation of those ideas to work on something that seemed to be more pressing. It was so exciting to get the documents in the factory, like the pay slips, with the stamps on them and everything, because there was something about the look of the stamp. This is a document, this is the moment in time. And I use that in the postpartum document as well, stamping it on the day of the time. So it is a kind of aesthetic of documentation as much as it is a collection of facts. everyone was a cinephile in the '68 movement because it was assumed that this was the most progressive medium. You know, this was movie, like Bartres, and still like the photograph, you know, it's kind of brushed with death, it doesn't go anywhere. But the cinema, that is the here and now, and it's moving, so this sounded great, you know. So actually, it was even a sort of move back to think about how anything in the form of a still installation could be as exciting as film at the time. But this is more my personal involvement in the work and what I did in postpartum document. And I think it would be all three of us, because I did do film, and I did think it would be great if you could do the installation like the film, you know, where you're kind of pulled in. There's a narrative. It's a different kind of diegetic space as opposed to just duration, which was the conventional conceptual preoccupation. So, you know, to have something that unfolds over time, and so that was very motivating. As archaic as it has become, it still has this unique feature of simultaneity in time, and very self-reflexive. So if you go into the movement and work installation, do you go to the films? Do you go to the, you know, do you read the stories first? When do you go to the research? And you kind of build your own signifying system, if you like, as you go, and you're meaning, you know, for the piece.